to the Disruptive by Design podcast. I'm George Seffers, Editor-in-Chief of Signal Magazine. I'm here today with Nuray Taylor, Signal Senior Reporter and Special Projects Manager. We just visited the Defense Information Systems Agency headquarters in Maryland to speak with our esteemed guest, Army Lieutenant General Paul T. Stanton, the Director of the Defense Information Systems Agency and Commander of Joint Forces Headquarters DODIN, or Department of Defense Information Network. Many of you will know General Stanton from his previous position, commanding the U.S. Army Cyber Center of Excellence in Fort Eisenhower.
General Stanton has been an essential presenter for several years at TechNet Augusta, and this year he will be a keynote speaker on the first day of TechNet Cyber, which will be held May 6th through 8th in Baltimore. Please join us for this local 3-day conference and discussions exploring the essential solutions for the enduring, no-fail mission to secure the cyber domain.
General Stanton, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We know you're a very busy man, and we appreciate you spending time with us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for being here.
You've only been in the position for about 6 months. What have you learned so far, and do you plan to make any changes based on what you've learned?
You know, the timeliness of this interview aligns perfectly in my ability to understand my responsibilities as the Director of the Defense Information Systems Agency and the Commander of the Joint Force Headquarters Department of Defense Information Network. Say that fast 3 times in a row. At any rate, I feel comfortable understanding where we are. And we've received recently some direct guidance from the administration. The Secretary of Defense has published his priorities. We are going to reestablish the warrior ethos. We're going to rebuild our military, and we are going to deter our adversaries. Based off of the guidance from the Secretary of Defense, the time has been perfect for me to align against my priorities. And so I just recently published for both the Joint Force Headquarters DODIN and DISA my 4 priorities. And I'll outline them for you this morning. So my first priority is readiness. My second is campaigning. Third is continuous modernization. And the fourth is establishing lethality. And the same 4 priorities apply to both the agency and the command. So when we look at our responsibilities, we have to defend the homeland, and we have to deter very aggressive actors within the cyberspace warfighting domain. We're in contact on a daily basis. We must be ready to do our jobs. And when we think about readiness in a military context, that means that each individual knows her or his responsibilities and is trained effectively in order to execute. But then we combine individuals into organizational constructs that have collective responsibilities. And we also have to validate that collectively we can perform those actions. We have to validate that individuals and collective organizations can execute those tasks. We have to provide the right training mechanisms to ensure that I have confidence that at any given point in time, folks know exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're capable of doing it. And that applies whether you are designing software, if you are executing defense of routers that sit on the edge of our boundary, or if you're hunting for the adversary inside of our networks. We have to be ready. We have to think about campaigning in a way that we haven't previously. When we think about campaigning, it's the series of coordinated events towards an objective. We can't sit back and let the enemy continue to pummel us with attacks and be principally in a reactionary mode. We have to start leaning forward and taking actions proactively to start imposing costs on our enemy. When we think about campaigning, we have to align against our highest priority missions. And they aren't necessarily missions that DISA or the Joint Force Headquarters DODIN determines. When we fight wars as the United States of America, we fight them through our combatant commands. So we have to understand what our combatant command priorities are. If we understand that, then we can study the threat. How might the threat in the cyberspace warfighting domain impede a combatant commander's ability to execute their principal mission? Do they have the intent? Do they have the tools and capability? And will the tools and capability actually stop our combatant commanders from being able to effectively execute their mission? You have to go through that mission analysis if you're going to be proactive and deter our adversaries from attempting to achieve effects. Once you understand what the missions of the combatant commands are and how the enemy might achieve their effects, well, then you can be deliberate in how you execute your defense. And again, that's not arbitrary. That requires deep planning, it requires thought, it requires resourcing, it requires positioning ahead of time. But when you do that, you can gain and maintain contact with the enemy and force the enemy to think hard about whether they want to attack the targets that are important to you. That's establishing deterrence. So campaigning is my second objective. Continuous modernization is the third objective because the rate of change of technology and the rate of change of the enemy, it's accelerating. And the way we have done business historically just isn't going to work. We will be in a continuous state of making modifications to our capabilities and therefore to how we train in order to use them effectively. And that applies to how we build capabilities, that applies to how we execute operations in the cyberspace warfighting domain. And my last priority is establishing lethality. We have to impose cost. It's a mindset. It's a culture about thinking about how to deliver effects to the enemy, how to make it harder for the enemy, how to impose cost on the enemy. You can sit back and wait for your tools to alert you. That's not satisfactory. That's not going to deter the enemy. That's not going to effectively defend the homeland. We have to think about where the enemy is going to be and be ahead of the enemy in the context of how we execute both the development and the execution of our cyber defenses. So those four priorities apply to both DISA and to the Joint Force Headquarters. Newly published internally. First time that I've exposed them externally. Okay. But this is where we're driving toward. And it's 6 months of observation and understanding what the responsibilities of the command are, where we are in our maturation, and then leading into aligning with the administration's priorities, the Secretary's guidance, Ms. Arrington's guidance as the acting CIO, putting all of that into alignment.
Okay, very good. So it sounds like you're suggesting we need to be more offensive in our cyber capabilities. Is that what you're saying?
We need to impose costs on the adversary to deter the adversary. Okay. And we as principally responsible for defensive cyber operations, building the network that is defensible and then aligning combat power to ensure that it is properly defended, we have to have a mindset of how do I hand off to the offense? If and when I establish contact with the enemy, I want to maintain contact with the enemy. And so a tighter relationship, which we are currently establishing with the forces that conduct offensive cyber operations, is critically important.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir. And you mentioned modernization. Do you have specific priorities underneath modernization?
To build what the combatant commands need.
Okay,
so, you know, when I highlight campaigning, campaigning again, series of coordinated events towards a common objective. What does the combatant commander need in order to execute their mission in and through the cyberspace warfighting domain? As a Defense Information Systems Agency, we build things, we design things, we integrate things, we buy things. We can't just buy things, we can't build things. We have to present systems of systems that solve functionally relevant problems in support of the combatant commander. And we have to do it in a timely fashion that meets that requirement. Combatant commanders have to focus on warfighting. We have to be a combat support agency that gives them what they need. And so the continuous modernization There are a number of different efforts, but they're all focused on what the combatant commanders are driving us towards.
Okay, and can you describe for our readers the role that you play and Ms. Arrington would play in that modernization process, and how do you guys work together to make that happen?
We have fantastic working relationships. So I'll start with what I think my responsibilities are. My responsibilities as a combat support agency and as the commander of Joint Force Headquarters, DODIN, we have to solve problems that are inherently joint, partner, and enterprise in scale. Services have a huge responsibility for developing, building, implementing, executing tactical level to operational level capabilities. But when we start crossing boundaries where multiple services have common equities and common challenges and common problems, and we need a technical solution, we are the operational arm within DISA in order to help provide that capability. And Ms. Arrington and the CIO, they provide us the guidance, the policy. They absolutely are central to helping us resource our plan, our campaign. But when it comes to executing at the operational level of war, that's where the Joint Force Headquarters DODIN assumes our responsibilities. We conduct ops. We're a combat support agency. We support the warfighter. Our higher headquarters enable us, they support us, they give us guidance. We're an execution arm.
Okay, great, thank you. One more question from me, and then I'll turn it over to Nuray. Mine are the easy questions. She's the one you have to look out for. So.
I'm bracing for impact.
Yeah. You mentioned readiness. What are some specific things that need to happen to improve readiness?
Yeah, so we have to adjust our training model. Right now, our focus on training is through an educational construct. It's through a certification process that is, in my terms, a point-in-time development. Point-in-time development doesn't align with continuous modernization and the rate of change of technology. We have to provide a training environment where individuals can continuously validate that they know how to operate the tools that we're presenting. Think about the technological tools that we introduce into the operations and defense of the DODIN. Again, it's continuous modernization, rate of change of technology, it's going to change. Adversary gets a vote, we're going to change. When we make that change, how do we ensure that individuals and organizations can now fight with the tools that we just put into the system? If our only training opportunity is point in time, that's not good enough. So what we need to drive towards is a training environment that allows both individuals and organizations to validate their proficiency at executing their tasks with the tools that we currently have in the environment. We're not there, but that's what we're driving towards.
All right, thanks, sir. Nuray?
So let's talk about data. Can you talk to us about some data-related improvements currently underway?
Absolutely. We have a massive dependency on data, as both the Joint Force Headquarters and DISA. I'll zoom out for a second and say that the Department of Defense has a data dependency. When we execute warfare, there's a data dependency. There's not a single system on the battlefield that isn't a data producer or data consumer or isn't intended to be in the near future. I used to say that your M4 rifle was the lone exception to be, but we're putting sensors on the rifles now that have to then communicate. So data is part of warfighting. From our responsibilities, we see the battle space through data. We have to see it effectively. How do we aggregate and correlate relevant data according to mission-driven questions? So when I stand on the operations floor, and whether that's our DISA Joint Operations Center or our Joint Force Headquarters DODIN Operations Center, I have questions that I need to answer. My questions need to drive the data sets that have to be collected, transported, aggregated, correlated, analyzed algorithmically, and then displayed in a meaningful way to support my decision. To that end, we have recently established a data analytics support cell that crosses the boundaries between the Joint Force Headquarters and DISA. DISA has a lot of data. The Joint Force Headquarters has a operationally relevant maneuver mission set. We have to combine those two in a way that makes sense. So we're increasingly, through the Data Analytics Support Cell, driving what we refer to as an analytic scheme of maneuver. I have to, based off of the question I ask, do we have the data? If we don't, how are we going to collect it? Do we have to put a new sensor out? Do we have to change our logging configuration? Then, do I have the underlying pipes in order to transport that data to a facility where I can store it and run computational relevant algorithms on top of it? Do I have that actual analytic? If I don't, I have to write it. Is it a new data set that I might have to perform extract, transfer, load, normalization onto that data in order to pull it in a meaningful way? These are the sorts of things that the Data Analytics Support Cell is helping us drive. And so when they emerge with an analytic schema maneuver, now we have a new tool that can help us answer interesting and relevant questions. I might ask that same question again, but invariably I'll ask a different question because the enemy gets a vote, the operating environment changes, and there's something that I don't yet know that I will ask that this team is dedicated to solving. It's a new construct. We just built it. So we're in the early stages of driving this process, but I'm wildly pleased with the progress that our team is making.
How long did it take to build it?
I sent a data call out to the agency and to the Joint Force Headquarters and said, who can write Python scripts? Who knows how to normalize and inject data? Who knows how to operate Elastic at a level deeper than the configuration, but rather at the data layer? So I cherry-picked the team. Small team on purpose in order to drive immediate results. However, as we look at becoming a sub-unified command, the Joint Force Headquarters on April 22nd, how do I standardize this model? How do I rewrite our manning documents to ensure that it's not an ad hoc pickup game in the future, but rather dedicated positions where I can write position descriptions and hire talented individuals to come in and perform this fantastic mission that remains in contact with the enemy? That's my recruiting plug. I'll take lots of data scientists on my team.
You mentioned Python and these sorts of courses that are necessary for the workforce during the summit. So this is all sort of going along that line. So is there anything else that that you look for as you continue to recruit, but also something the industry can help you with?
Absolutely. So a large portion of our workforce is contracted. And so the contractors that work on our team are members of our team. And
Right.
absolutely culturally relevant. They're members of our team. And so we're looking at the right relationships with industry to write contracts for individuals that have the skill sets necessary to perform some of these actions. But we're also revising position descriptions and for government civilians to come in and perform tasks. We're also recruiting military folks that have the capabilities that I'm referring to join and fill some of the positions that are military billets within our organizational construct.
Are you able to fill the positions that you need?
Well, so where we are in the movie. So we just established the concept of the Data Analytics Support Cell. We're right now in the process of writing the position descriptions. And you know, if you think about the military manning cycle, normally folks move during the summertime. I'll tell you that I've recruited heavily, and I'm pleased with my draft picks that will be showing up this summer to help us reinforce the hardworking folks that are already knocking down targets on our behalf.
We're going to shift to command and control. So how does DISA support the advancement of command and control, obviously known as C2, across the combatant commands and services?
Yeah, so that's a multifaceted question. So I'll start with our C2 relationship with field offices and field commands. DISA has a field office or field command embedded with and direct support of each one of the combatant commands. They vary in size, but they are led by an 06 commander that is responsible for that field office. They have to be neck deep in understanding that combatant command's priorities. And the relationship that they have with the J6 inside of a combatant command is absolutely necessary, in my terms insufficient. They have to be nested in with the 3 that's driving ops. They have to be nested in with the chief of staff that is organizing how the staff is operating. They have to understand the commander's priorities. And then our field offices and field commands feed that information back to our headquarters so that we can make appropriate adjustments to deliver meaningful capabilities and support to the combatant commands. That C2 construct is incredibly valuable. In addition, we have recognized a requirement to C2 alongside industry. Industry is an inherent and organic part of the DODIN. They're inside the DODIN. The software that we run is developed largely by industry. They extend the DODIN. If you think about cloud service providers and the environments that they run, if a network card goes bad at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, it's an industry partner that's going to go remediate that. It's not someone that is assigned to DISA. So they're inside the DODIN, they extend the DODIN, and then we have a DODIN dependency on telecommunications companies that support the global transport of our systems. Historically, we have had what I refer to as a transactional relationship. And industry is incredibly responsive. When something breaks, they help fix it immediately. Our ops center kicks into high gear. We make the phone calls to industry. Doesn't matter day, time, or night. Our industry partners launch folks out to make a restoral of a fiber cut, as an example. And that all works swimmingly. Can't believe I just said that word. However, in actual crisis, in God forbid combat, a transactional relationship isn't good enough. Our industry partners have to understand where our priorities are so that they can help adjust how they leverage their own internal personnel in order to support the priorities. Imagine a scenario that we don't have one cable cut, we have 60. And simultaneously, we have cyber attacks against our industry partners. We can't be transactional in communicating what the highest priority is for the execution of the nation's defense. I have to understand what capabilities our industry partners have. I can't ask them to go fix 50 fiber cuts if they only have personnel to fix 5. I need to understand that in a meaningful way. And so as we continue to think about campaigning, think about what it means to defend the homeland, think about what it means to be proactive vice reactive, this construct of command and control alongside industry is a rapidly emerging topic. I don't have the answers, but I know that industry partners are willing to have the conversation with us, and I think it's a direction we need to head in the near future.
Would you say that right now you're not understanding each other well enough?
Oh, I think we understand each other. I think that this construct that we're discussing is relatively new. We haven't asked them to C2 alongside us because the relationship that we've had has been entirely sufficient and responsive to fixing the problems that we've identified up to this point. I just think that in deterring our adversaries, defending the homeland, our relationship will mature in accordance with our Secretary's priorities.
sort of touched on this, but to give you an opportunity to speak further, if you'd like, what are some other necessary improvements that you can talk about when it comes to C2?
Yeah, so internally, our own processes to make sure that we can execute command and control at scale is something that we need to really think our way through. It builds off of the same conversation, but internally, if we're seeing cyber attacks against multiple different elements of the DODIN simultaneously, how do we align our precious resources, our combat power, in a way that is highly prioritized and most effective? Again, if you think about campaigning, it can't be, I'm just going to send a cyber protection team out to the place where I see evidence of the adversary. Is the adversary's effect going to impede our ability to execute the mission? That's a fundamentally different question at a level deeper that plays into how we're going to command and control. Additionally, we have to think about campaigning through the lens of the threat. The threat is very specific and is playing a long game. And they're thinking about what targets they're attacking, and it's not arbitrary. So the insights that we derive from conducting cybersecurity missions where we see the adversary have to be tied together with where we anticipate seeing the adversary the next time, or where we see 4 or 5 different elements that are fighting a common adversary. We have to be able to command and control that effectively.
How can you improve cyber, which you did just speak about, and other capabilities at the edge, along with C2?
We have to think about the edge. When we think about a fight in the Indo-Pacific, the tyranny of distance is incredibly real. If our capabilities are not inside the first island chain, they're not going to get there in time. So we have to think about what assets, how much, and this is an evolving relationship with our supported combatant commanders. What questions do they need to answer? What data needs to answer those questions? How much data do they have? Where does it need to go in order to support the question? So very similar to the dialogue I was having about answering my own questions inside of my own ops center. The same applies to combatant commanders. What decisions do you need to make that determine what data that you need? Where are you deriving that data from sensors, from logs? Where does it need to be in order to be aggregated and correlated in order to help support that decision? What's the volume of that data? If I don't understand the volume of the data, then I'm not prepared to align sufficient capacity to transport it. We have undersea cables, we have overhead capabilities. Internally, we have terrestrial fiber. We have a lot of capability to move data, but I have to understand the volume of the data to know how much capacity do we need to send forward so that it's there at time of need. And I also have to think about the timelines associated with restoring capability in the event that we move into crisis or conflict.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to George.
Okay, thank you, Nuray.
So all the hard questions are over now? Do I get to exhale and relax?
It's not easy.
Okay, all right.
All right, where is DISA now in implementing the DISA Next strategy, and what are some next steps?
So the strategy that my predecessor, Bob Skinner, put into place, fantastic. I literally did not change a word of his strategy. It is spot on where we need to go. My focus has been closer in. What are the tangible and measurable outcomes that we're shooting for on a near-term horizon that move us towards the strategic goals, but make tangible and measurable progress? This is the art of campaigning. General Skinner set out, this is where you need to go, and that's spot on. Now, how do I take an intermediate objective and help drive our resourcing across the agency and across the command in order to achieve that tangible and measurable outcome. And then, once done, assess its effectiveness and target the next. So that's been my approach in order to drive the DISA Next strategy.
Can you give us some specifics there? What are some things that you expect to be able to measure?
Yeah, so my favorite is working alongside the multi-partner environment team with the executive agent headquartered in support of the Air Force with guidance from the CIO. We, as DISA operational arm, have a role to play in order to provide meaningful capability in support of the multi-partner environment executive agent. We're targeting a capability that can be leveraged in a hybrid cloud environment that can support combatant command's requirements to aggregate and correlate data in a meaningful way. So that is one of our intermediate objectives that we're driving towards. Again, driven by the prioritization from the combatant commands. We're watching what they need. They need data, and they need to be able to analyze it, and they need to be able to analyze it in ways that they didn't know about yesterday. And so they need that flexibility and that agility. We need to provide them with the underlying architecture that is normalized and standardized across all 11 combatant commands, so that we don't do one-offs at each one, but rather provide them the environment to run the tool that they need, and then give them the agility to adjust that tool.
Sir, the DISA Next strategy also calls for divesting technical debt. Where is DISA now, and can we expect anything more along those lines? Absolutely.
So one of our significant priorities right now is driving what we refer to as DODIN in support of the defense agencies and field activities. There's a lot of technical debt inside of the DAFAs. And what we're driving is a modernized architecture built on top of zero trust principles that are defensible. And what we like to do is accelerate our modernization there. Until we are successful, we're going to drag that technical debt with us. We can't afford to do that. So that's our initial focus right now.
Okay, thank you. Will the capabilities provided by DISA 2030 change the way that warfighters operate?
I think the way that warfighters operate are going to change the capabilities that we provide to them.
Yeah, okay.
And again, this is being supportive and responsive to the emergent warfighter needs. On day one of assuming the directorship and commander of the Joint Force Headquarters, I said, if it's not supporting the warfighter, then why are we doing it? Industry does a lot of things very well. Clearly. Oftentimes, those industry solutions have to be put together in unique and meaningful ways to support the warfighting mission set. Much of our warfight is conducted in an expeditionary sense. That makes things hard. If you have to move your capability forward and forward over great distance and forward over great distance while the enemy is attempting to kill you, that's a fundamentally different problem than industry has to face on a routine basis. That's our problem. So how do we put those capabilities together in a meaningful way? We have to listen to the warfighter. And while we have strategic objectives and we understand the art of the possible and we understand the left and right limits of what technology can do, we have to make adjustments in our cost, schedule, performance, and delivery that are responsive to the emergent need of the combatant commands, the warfighter in general.
Okay, and let me ask kind of the same question I just asked. With DISA 2030, where are you now, and what are some next steps or major milestones or major events that we can expect?
Yeah, so much of the conversation to date is our current focus for making measurable outcomes. So adjusting how we are command and controlling, adjusting our relationship and amplifying the field office and field command relationship to the combatant commands such that their feedback comes in and informs our cost, schedule, and performance across our acquisition community that drives how we support cloud infrastructure and the underlying Defense Information System network. That all has to be tied together in a meaningful way. I have to align the circuits from PEO transport with the cloud capabilities from our J9, with the configuration of DoDNet from the J6, with the integration of capabilities of GeeksJ and our management systems that PEO Services is putting together. All of that has to be tied together and then aligned in time and space with delivery to support the combatant commands. What we've put into place is an adjustment to our thinking and our processes to focus on these intermediate objectives that take us towards the strategic goals.
Let me go back to the analytics cell that you were talking about. When do you have a goal for when that'll be fully operational, or?
So currently, the NDAA language has directed that the Joint Force Headquarters be elevated to a subunified command. Mm-hmm. We're currently in the process, alongside U.S. Cyber Command, of doing the mission analysis to determine exactly what that means. As we become a headquarters that has a supporting role to DODIN areas of operations, there are things that we have to be able to provide them with. Analytics is one of them. Refined intelligence that is relevant to how they operate within their area of operations, also incredibly relevant. Effective planning so that we can campaign as opposed to being reactionary. Building out our J7 to support the training environment that I referenced earlier. Our mission analysis for the elevation to being a sub-unified headquarters is helping us determine the timing and tempo to build out the data analytics support cell.
Okay, and when do you expect that mission analysis to be complete?
So we, based off of the NDAA directive, we have a memorandum submitted to the OSD, awaiting signature to declare our target is initial operating capability on the 22nd of April. Subsequent fully operational capability will be event-driven. We are neck deep in mission analysis alongside U.S. Cyber Command right now to think through the function, the organizational constructs, the training requirements. So I don't have a hard time other than a target to achieve IOC by the 22nd of April. Other developments will be event-driven. And largely the resourcing picture will play a huge role in how quickly we can achieve what we define as being fully operational and capable.
Sir, thank you again so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.